Teaching practices can benefit from the diversity present in multicultural classrooms. Actually, research in educational practices, outcomes in multicultural classrooms, and practical experience actually shows that multicultural classrooms are not without difficulties and challenges. Many people, including teachers and students, are not yet used to coping outside their monocultural group. The monocultural group could be due to ethnicity, language, religion, gender, or it could be any other cultural group. The problem here is that this can result in ethnocentric attitudes and behaviors. Ethnocentrism has to do with difficulties in recognizing and or behaving effectively with a person of a different cultural background. And it has to do with the inability of an individual to accept the existence of cultural diversity and even less to consider cultural diversity as a beneficial resource. Ethnocentric behaviors can result in either active or open conflicts or passive, less explicit conflicts between students, as well as in some cases between teachers and students. Sometimes, and even I would say most of the times, the teacher can be unaware of these intercultural issues. In most cases, lack the skills to deal with these issues or to resolve these issues in a multicultural classroom. As I mentioned earlier on, stereotypes are generalized beliefs about members of a particular category of people. An example of stereotyping is generalization or affirmation. For example, all men are wicked. This is a generalization, of course, made without an investigation into if this feature or this information applies or not to a particular man that you are referring to. So you are stereotyping if you assume that all men are wicked or that a certain man is wicked simply because he is a man. Stereotyping here assumes that as a member of that certain category, he necessarily shares a certain feature. Teachers possess certain stereotypes about some of their students. Either the student is a member of a certain group, and students also possess stereotypes about teachers and, of course, about their peers as well. As an example, a teacher could think in this way that all students that come from a certain area, it could be a certain region, it could be a certain tribe or of a country, are not particularly smart. All teachers that come from the capital, I mean, they are always posh and they are snobbish to us. So these are examples of stereotypes, generalized statements for which an individual's shortcoming is tagged on a whole class of people. Now, let's assess ourselves. What stereotypes do you have? How you acquired the stereotypes, where you learned the stereotypes, and how you absorbed the stereotypes. We all do have stereotypes. Most of them are negative beliefs or generalizations towards others. But some stereotypes can be positive. It could be showing preferences for people who are from our the same cultural background as we do, or same social group, or towards people that we want to identify with. But stereotypes can also be neutral, though incorrect. For instance, a good example is that all Italians eat pasta. That seems like a neutral stereotype. because its impact is neither, let's say, particularly negative or positive. But it is important for us to become aware of our stereotypes and how these stereotypes can actually prevent us from having an open and synergetic relationship with others. And it is important actually for us to be aware of where the stereotypes came from and challenge these stereotypes by deconstructing them and finding exceptions. Actually, some stereotypes can be historical, in some cases, even institutionalized, creating social disadvantages and privileges for members of certain groups, people of color, gender, ethnic group, religious belongings, etc. Stereotypes can also be founded on some true facts or some tendencies that we observe. So, not all stereotypes are basically wrong, actually. But for instance, it's true that many Italians eat pasta daily, but it is not necessarily true that all Italians eat pasta daily. So, it is important actually to recognize and avoid stereotypes and actually not take them for granted as a resource of knowledge for people that we do not know. Even if they belong to a certain group, we do not have information about them unless we dig into an in depth process of learning or searching for information about them. Stereotypes, in many cases, can also be used to preserve and defend a certain social identity, which then creates a problem, which is creating the us versus them kind of separation. These stereotypes often have negative impact on people who are the object of the stereotypes, and they can be easily transformed into prejudices, evaluations, or judgments about members of certain groups without valid judgment or information, just based on what we've seen from one individual. Stereotypes and prejudgments often cause discrimination, treating others differently, penalizing members of certain groups. In a multicultural classroom, certain students may refuse to sort of carry out a conversation or engage in a group activity or a class project with students from other ethnic groups or tribes because those students possess stereotypes. I don't want to work with this individual because people from their tribe are always dull, or people from this tribe, they never do well in school. This prejudgment process can result sometimes and even unconsciously in a breakdown of collaborative spirit, as the student who feels superior will sort of dominate the situation, possibly taking no input from the other students. The student who is often the object of stereotypes can become traumatized even without you knowing as a teacher and may hide this trauma by laughing it off. In other cases, the student may actually develop some form of closeness or aggressive tendencies. It could be passive aggressive tendencies. So, discriminations are or can be prejudicial treatment of different categories of people because of their ethnic group, religion, tribe, gender, sexual orientation, social or class belonging, and so on. Discriminations are still a serious issue in many contexts and societies, even where we have these anti discrimination legislations. So, as a teacher, you might not necessarily see these conflicts as such, but the students who experience discriminations, many times, they neither fight back and they don't complain. And in many cases, they suffer alone. And many times they sort of interiorize or absorb the labels or beliefs that support the stereotypes, thus labeling and limiting themselves. So, as a teacher, it's important to note this. It is also important to note that teachers also discriminate. So, a teacher might decide to teach in a local dialect in a multicultural classroom or showing favor to people from their culture, ethnic group, and gender, and neglecting students from other backgrounds. So think about the classes that you teach. As a teacher, can you remember those students from a different cultural background whom nobody consciously selects to work with because they are from a different cultural background, or because they cannot speak the dominant local official language? So, who are these students? Is there any way you can intervene? We all know that these are complex challenges, and it basically requires that you possess intercultural awareness, sensitivity, and effective skills in order to solve these problems. Acquaint yourself with your own stereotypes, with your own prejudices, and the discriminations that you met out towards students. And take time to document the ones that you can discover and ask yourself, how will you feel if you were at the receiving end of the stereotype? So the next step would be to then educate yourself about other cultures and groups and sort of reach out to these affected groups. Lead your students to do the same. So using small group interactions and giving students instructions to collaborate on a class assignment is one way you can deal with these possible multicultural class conflicts and challenges.